Although horror games aren't the most popular of genres, many gamers still enjoy being scared in a controlled environment. For those thrill seekers, situations that would be otherwise traumatic make up for great video game experiences. Surprisingly, being scared while playing isn't exclusive to horrors. Many levels or parts of games can be scary for some gamers, despite the games themselves not being part of the genre, like for example Ravenholm in Half-Life 2 or the hospital level in Brothers in Arms Hell's Highway. It just so happens that the developers can sometimes use our own phobias against us to purposely, or not, frighten us in non-horror games. Today, let's take a look at how video game creators use our own fears to spice things up in games that aren't the first choice of a horror fan. One of the most popular phobias, or irrational fears in the world, is arachnophobia, a fear of spiders. If you're an arachnophobe just like me, then you probably remember shitting your proverbial pants in Skyrim, where we had to fight enormous spiders in a first-person perspective. A similar experience can be seen in Dragon Age Origins, especially in the Mage origin story, where we encountered spiders of a significant size. Lucky for us though, as we exterminated them in a third-person perspective, it was much easier to stomach than in Skyrim. And speaking of fantasy games, I would also have to mention the video game adaptation of Return of the King, which scared me to death when I was a kid. In Shelob's lair, we had to fight various different arachnids. Smaller ones in swarms, larger spiders attacking us in groups, and last but not least, the gargantuan Shelob herself, in a nightmarish yet satisfying boss fight. It's obvious for any arachnophobe that spiders in those games are purely fictional, and it's impossible to find similar creatures in real life. Nevertheless, it doesn't stop those animals from filling us with dread. Sometimes all we need is something that moves just like a spider, or resembles one, just to keep us on the edge of our seat. An example of that can be found in Limbo or Lego Harry Potter. In Limbo, we only see a silhouette of a spider for a while, but it moves just like a real one and, in fact, is very creepy, even when you get to dismember it later on. In the first Lego Harry Potter game, the terrifying Aragog is made entirely out of bricks, but the chase scene at the end of the level makes him look just like a giant spider running towards us. But it's not always the size that matters. In Tomb Raider Underworld, spiders can lunge at us and give us a heart attack, while in Uncharted 3, we're being chased by an entire sea of small spiders, and that's probably the most traumatic for me. Another popular phobia is tied directly to ghosts and paranormal activities, and that's phasmophobia. Such a fear can add a lot of tension to games with paranormal elements that don't even make use of jump scares and shock value that much. Like for example in Beyond Two Souls. The next title from the creators of the acclaimed Heavy Rain was intended to be a touching story of a unique relationship between a medium and a lost soul, while we quickly discovered later on that apart from making us cry, it also made us rage quit and try to find an exorcist. Following the non-chronological story of Aiden and Jodie, we soon discovered that apart from the overall friendly Aiden, the game was also inhabited by less friendly ghosts that wanted to cross over into the real world. And whenever we had a scene involving them, the game was getting nightmarish really fast, and well, too scary if you came in just looking for the feels. If you get uncomfortable with surprise ghost levels, then you should also probably avoid Metal Gear Solid 3 Snake Eater, in which, in the later half of the game, we were pitched against Sorrow, a medium from the elite Cobra unit. Not only was this encounter creepy and a bit out of place, it also criticized our playstyle, sort of. Walking down a shallow river, we heard the screams of our fallen enemies and were even shown bosses we have killed so far. And since we're talking about water, let's dive a bit deeper and take a look at the ocean floor. Here we can find thalassophobia, an irrational fear of ocean depths, which developers sometimes use. One game that uses such a fear to strengthen the atmosphere is the first BioShock, which, while not a horror per se, is quite scary in its opening hours. And that's not only due to its over-reliance on jump scares and use of creepy enemies, but also the fact that we're under the sea and only thin glass walls separate us from drowning. In BioShock, the fact that we're underwater is only a part of what makes the atmosphere so dense and memorable. If we were to find a game that relies on this fear much more, we would have to take a look at a different title, Subnautica, a survival game in which our hero crash lands on a desolate oceanic planet. Here, like in any other survival game, we have to gather resources, craft, and try to stay alive. But there's a catch. We do most of that while submerged. And oh boy was it fun, and scary for that matter, as the ocean in the game can be both breathtaking at times and fear-inducing when we try to navigate it during nighttime in pitch-black darkness, often not even knowing how far we are from the seabed, and when even the most insignificant sound from a nearby sea creature can result in a direct heart attack. Other games also rely on that fear, but not to such an extent, like for example Inside, in which the underwater segments are probably the most fear-inducing in the entire game, mostly thanks to mysterious childlike sea monsters. And speaking of children, Alma from the first Fear game and other creepy children from Asian horrors that inspired her show us that even something as innocent and helpless as a child can make for some efficient nightmare fuel. This is partially due to a certain dissonance of sorts. Since our evolution has over time programmed our brains to look after children and find small things cute, we feel anxious when such things are a source of in-game danger, especially when presented with some body horror, like for example the unbaptized children in Dante's Inferno. And that often comes from fedophobia, a fear of children, or tocophobia, a fear of giving birth. Personally, I was terrified the most by the botchling in Witcher 3, a demon of a miscarried fetus. While the quest with the botchling was rather melancholic in tone, I couldn't help but be frightened by every second this monster was on screen, because A, it was just horrifying, and B, it brought to mind those biased anti-abortion videos we were shown in elementary school. Another game that can rely on our fear of children to shock is Catherine, in which one level has us escaping from a gigantic zombie baby, which is supposed to symbolize the main character's fear of settling down and becoming a father. And speaking of gigantic babies, we have another Japanese game to feature those, which apparently are a thing now. In one of the endings of Drakengard, a rather lesser-known RPG, the game ended with the sky being filled with portals through which demonic flying babies entered the world. In case you didn't have insomnia, well, you do now. You're welcome. In conclusion, even though some developers don't want to scare us, thanks to popular fears, some parts of games that are intended to be just creepy end up as full-fledged horror scenes that can leave a stronger impression than any other scene of intentional horror. But if I'm being honest, I'm not complaining. Being scared while playing adds a welcome sense of tension, and since controlled exposure can help cure phobias, it can help us in the end. Not so long ago, I came across an idea that tried just that: arachnophobia, a VR experience designed for helping arachnophobes overcome their fears. So with that in mind, can, let's say, Catherine make you less scared of becoming a father? Well, not exactly. But it's worth remembering that unintentional horror can be the best horror, and at least from a developer's perspective, using common fears can be an easy way to leave a lasting impact. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.